This podcast is made on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, the Wurrung and the Bunurong. We'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to their elders, both past and present, and emerging. From the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences at the University of Melbourne, this is Psych Talks.
Hello, I'm Lynne Malcolm and welcome to Psych Talks. This series looks at what studies in psychology can reveal about some of today's big issues. Each episode dives into one facet of modern life in Australia. You'll hear from psychology experts and a lineup of fabulous commentators as we unlock insights into what drives people and makes society tick. First up, we're entering the murky world of misinformation.
I think the main thing to realize is that all of us have the capacity to fall down a conspiracy theory spiral, and especially all of us have the capacity to be taken in by misinformation.
False, misleading and inaccurate information seems to be everywhere. In fact, last year in 2021, Macquarie Dictionary named fake news their word of the decade. Today, we're exploring the psychological aspects of why people buy into misinformation and seeing if there's a more productive way to navigate our encounters with those peddling mistruths. We're starting off with Liam's story.
His family and my family have been friends forever, so I knew him growing up. They were all part of the church, and it wasn't until probably I was about 13 or 14, I think, when my family left that church. His family stayed at that church. And that's sort of where our families kind of split. My folks would see them in town every now and then, and it wasn't like there were hard feelings or anything. It was just you sort of moved in different circles kind of thing.
This is Liam Brewer, who grew up in the regional city of Bendigo in Victoria.
He stayed in the church. I left when I was probably around 16 or 17. I stopped going to church altogether. Yeah, so he was full-on church guy. Married, kids, the whole thing. Whereas I went music and went to Melbourne and...
Had some fun?
Yeah, let's get into rock and roll and heavy metal and have a good time. So yeah, totally different paths. But, you know, he was always a nice bloke and easy to talk to and just a pretty genuine, nice Christian bloke.
And when did you notice something was up with your former friend?
Well, because I hadn't been in contact with him heaps, it wasn't really until Facebook came along that I started to get back in touch with some of those people from years before. And he just started getting more right-wing leaning, which politically he was always sort of that way. But then I think it was around when Trump started running for president and it sort of snowballed from there. He wasn't really a Q guy, but he definitely was just anti-mainstream media and was picking up all this rubbish from, these quite easily debunkable other sources. It's not like full-blown tinfoil hat, which is, like, for me, a little bit almost worse because it's a bit more subtle. It's easier for other people to buy into when it's not that, like, hey, there are lizard people in the royal family end of things.
If you're on social media, chances are you'll have a friend like Liam's among your wider network. Over the past few decades, misinformation has increasingly infiltrated our screens, newspapers, and chat messages.
A lot of what we're interested in studying is how people pass on information that they believe is true, but is actually false in some way.
This is Dr. Andrew Perfors, Associate Professor of Psychology at the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences.
I mean, misinformation is as old as time, but the news environment has changed so much. We've got social media and people have so much more power to send information around themselves. You don't need to be someone with a big microphone and a lot of wealth.
Of course, established media outlets can also be guilty of touting misinformation.
Especially from a mainstream media point of view, it's at the point where the information is secondary to the message that wants to be pushed behind it.
David Milner is an award-winning journalist and columnist with The Shot.
You can twist things very easily by excluding context. That's the major way that it's happened.
This removing context has a big pernicious effect because it means you can never talk about any of the complicated nuance that really matters. You spend all of your time trying to fill in that missing context. Even if people end up not believing it, they've changed the discussion in a really bad way.
Just think about what happened in Victoria. There really were things that the Andrews government should have been criticised for, but you have to spend so much time convincing people that actually he's not a dictator and actually some of this stuff is really sensible.
11:59 p.m. Wednesday, Victorians will have to wear a face mask. Like the lockdowns, no evidence, not a single slip of paper to justify this make-it-up-as-you-go approach.
Organisations, let's say News Corp as a random example I've pulled from out of nowhere, will do things like encourage anti-scientific things like vaccine hesitancy, things like these masks don't work, they didn't do anything to stop the spread of coronavirus. And in this environment, it just spreads like wildfire. It plays on people's fears, people's anxieties, people's preconceived ideologies.
I hate the word scared, but people are scared.
All of us have the capacity to fall down a conspiracy theory spiral, and especially all of us have the capacity to be taken in by misinformation. In fact, probably all of us do believe some misinformation right now. Really, misinformation preys on certain cognitive biases that serve us pretty well in the real world. Like, for instance, we have this thing where basically the more fluently we understand something, the more we believe it, which makes sense, but it means that you can sort of sell simple ideas much more easily than more complex ideas. And it's, unfortunately, the truth is very often complex. And so it's easier to get people to believe a simple misinformation than a complex truth.
Dave thinks that conspiracy theories, similarly, offer a vision of the world based on order and control. It's an idea he picked up when researching the 9/11 Twin Towers conspiracy.
Even though it's a horrible conspiracy theory that the US president brought down these towers for his own nefarious means, people were finding comfort in that because it removed cruel randomness from the world. It was by design, and cruel randomness is the scariest thing any human has to face. And I think all conspiracy theories do basically provide that level of comfort that, you know what, it's not going to your plan, but it is going to someone's plan.
Going back to Liam's online encounters with his childhood friend, Andrew believes that his experience
is very typical.
He wasn't just reading one thing and then running with it. It's like it'd be parroted by a bunch of different people, but there wouldn't be any real corroborating evidence or anything to really back it up. It was just a bunch of different people were saying the same thing.
We have this cognitive bias where basically the more often we hear something, the more we believe it, even if we know it's false. So you can just repeat something very often and you'll believe it more. And again, that kind of makes sense when you're not in an environment where you can artificially increase the frequency of things really easily. But, misinformation propagates just by saying it a lot, basically. And all of us are susceptible to this because it's an unconscious kind of thing.
According to Andrew, we're also inclined to not accept new information when it doesn't fit within our established worldview.
We're still trying to figure out the reason for this because it sounds really stupid. Why would people? But, human brains are stupid in many ways. The reason is usually because if you believe something, you believe it as part of a whole web of theories about the world. And so even if you hear this bit is wrong, if you don't have something to replace it with or something that also stitches together all your other theories about the world, then your brain still kind of wants to fill something in there. And so to correct something is essentially a process not of just fixing that information, but also fixing all the links between all the rest of our theories about the world.
Yeah, whenever he'd put up an article, I'd try and put up something against it that had reliable sources. And yeah, he'd just dismiss it as being rubbish because it's mainstream media. How do you expect to debate anybody or have a reasonable conversation with someone if you're just going to dismiss anything that doesn't fit what you want it to be. He'd sort of twist words around and sort of project that back on other people. It's like, oh, you're just trying to manipulate the narrative. It's like, but that's what you're doing. It's exactly what you're doing. And he would never admit to it, and he'd just drop that thread and start a new one.
We've heard how we're all prone to believe in and cling to misinformation because of certain cognitive biases built into the human psyche. Andrew thinks that those swayed by conspiracy theories tend to be first drawn in at a difficult point in their life.
People who fall for conspiracy theories, they've got something extra going on, which is generally a big emotional need to believe them. And that is what causes a whole host of behaviors where they seek out a lot of this confirming information.
He just seemed really angry at everything, and that sort of came out. The way that he was using dialogue was really aggressive, and the way that if anybody spoke against what he was saying, he would go full attack mode on them.
Usually the first emotions are generally feeling alienated, angry, wanting someone to blame. And again, this is something that all of us are susceptible to at some times in our lives. And if you talk to people who have become trapped in conspiracy theories or cults or any of this, it's almost always someone who's at a really fragile time in their life. They've had a breakup, they've lost their job, they've lost their social and emotional support. And so these theories give them a sense of specialness. They understand the truth.
I hadn't really noticed anything with him then when I first sort of got in touch with him. And then at some point, him and his wife split. And I think that's sort of where there started to be a shift with him. If you look at the pictures and the other stuff that he posts, like one of his kids is doing amazingly in soccer and he's a pretty good coach. And so there's all these really nice, happy family photos and everything's lovey-dovey and life's great. And then just this vitriol coming from him on Facebook at people. It's like, yeah, something's hurting in there.
Curbing the spread of misinformation is no small challenge. As the technology behind digital platforms has become more sophisticated, so too has the means of disseminating mistruths.
My background was I did tech and video games journalism for a long time, and YouTube is a big centre for that sort of, discussion.
We're back with journalist Dave Milner.
It really only takes a few random recommendations via YouTube's algorithm to go from a video about Minecraft to almost extreme outright white supremacism. It's 3 or 4 clicks and a kid is unwittingly down that rabbit hole.
You also look at the algorithms for social media sharing, like Facebook, Twitter, and stuff. And what they do is that they reward people with extreme takes. Those are the ones that get lots of engagement, and they reward engagement in a certain way. So people with mild, well, let's listen, or a really long, complicated thing, that doesn't fit on Twitter. Those things aren't talked about. They're not emphasized as much. So just the way that the algorithms work actually distorts the information itself. And you have to take a stance on some level, say this is not good content. And almost no one wants to do that because it feels like that's against free speech. But of course, having algorithms that preference some content over another is also against free speech. But it feels like it's less because it's not us making the decision. It still, though, is. And I think that's something that we're really only starting to wrestle with as a society. I think we just have to admit that we have to make some decisions, because if not, decisions are happening to us anyways.
If big tech can't be relied on to properly police the spread of misinformation, how do we best protect ourselves and others from being duped by it?
I think what's gone wrong recently is this, it's a lack of nuance. It's this idea that all of this is fake news or none of it is, when actually people that have been pushing for critical reading of the media have just been pushing for taking every single source on its own merits and working out what's nonsense and what's editorial and what's opinion and being able to shift through that. And this just has to come through education. It has to start quite young as well. We need to be talking about this in, if not primary schools, definitely high school.
If you look at the sort of studies that have been done on this, there's so much research trying to figure out how to make people more resistant to misinformation. much of it unsuccessful. And the things that I've seen that have gotten the most success, we call inoculation, but it's basically this kind of media literacy training. So not teaching people about specific things or specific misinformation, but teaching them about the way that someone who's trying to fool you tries to fool you and what to be alert for. And so that you can kind of work backwards to be able to say, hey, this is a really clickbaity title. It's really written in a way to take advantage of my emotions. It might be trying to make me, get me to believe something that's not true.
It felt like anytime I tried to steer him in a different direction, especially using evidence, he'd just get his back up and get defensive and dismiss it. And it became more just trying to put different information on his threads that other people who are reading could see.
And finally, the million-dollar question. If you see that someone's been conned by false information, should you try to point this out to them, like in Liam's case?
I don't know, tried a few things, but it just seemed like that nothing was really going to push him in any direction. He was already pretty well set.
And how did things between you two end up?
It was really difficult to try and get through to him, so I just sort of got to a point where I had to stop because it was doing my head in, just trying to, I'd spending way too much time being angry. And it's like, it's not going to get me anywhere, so what am I doing? This is pointless, which is a shame.
I think there's a different approach if it's just misinformation, if someone believes the wrong thing. I mean, in that case, and they don't seem very wedded to it, then I think it's fine to say, is that really true? I've had friends do that to me and I've always really appreciated it. It gets a lot harder if they've made this, if this piece of misinformation isn't an isolated thing, if it's part of a web of how they view the world, if they've put a lot of their identity into it, then it's, you correcting it. Basically, all you're doing is ensuring that they will not listen to you in the future and they will distrust you more.
It's just such a difficult situation. And I know in my personal life, when I've come up with people that have started going down these rabbit holes, I've definitely made mistakes by just hoping that the slightly belligerent approach to logic and come on, please, it just always repels them. It never draws them back to the realm of sane reality that you're trying to achieve.
Trying to get at the emotional reason, which means often not talking about the thing, but sort of addressing they're really lonely, they're really angry, and helping them find some other ways to meet this emotional need other than whatever the conspiracy theory is giving them. And the other thing is, I think, just asking them about it, but not in a sort of patronizing or sort of, I'm going to prove you wrong way, but just like, oh, you said this, so would that mean that? I want to find out about it. Because there's this thing called the illusion of explanatory depth. We think we understand these things, but once we actually try to explain it, there's not much there. And so you can do this. There's often misinformation and conspiracy theories are the same way, right? So they haven't actually tried to integrate all these bits in their head. And so if you can say, so you said this, does that mean that, or whatever, and just make them walk through it themselves, then sometimes people, if it's an inconsistency you notice yourself, it sticks with you a lot more.
But attempting to change the mind of someone who's heavily attached to misinformation or conspiracy theories is typically a very long and uphill battle.
This is a difficult thing to decide to engage with. It could potentially go on for months or years and without any sense of achievement.
I would say also you have almost no hope if you're not close to them. It's also probably not worth it emotionally to you if you're not close to them. Arguing on Facebook is fine, and maybe you want to do it for the other people who might be reading it, but you're not going to persuade your Facebook friend of anything, It might be if it's your parent, though, and you live with them and you're willing to do this, but it's a huge emotional cost.
You've been listening to Psych Talks with me, Lynne Malcolm. I'd like to thank our guests for today, Associate Professor Andrew Perfors and David Milner, and Liam Brewer for sharing his story with us. This episode was made possible by the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences at the University of Melbourne. It was written and produced by Carly Godden, with Amy Bugeja and Mairead Murray providing editorial and production assistance. Arch Cuthburtson was our sound engineer, and the show's music was composed by Chris Falk. For more episodes of Psych Talks, find us wherever you get your podcasts. Bye for now.